Are you too old to be an indie game developer? Am I So I was going to start this video with a list of successful developers that had released their first game after the age of 30, but I couldn't find any. So I believe Jonathan Blow was in his late 30s when he released Braid, but by that time he'd been involved in game development since his 20s. It would appear that the indie game development demographic is a 20-something male, so you're f***ed if you're a 30-something man, and even more f***ed if you're a woman. So I'll ask the question again, are you too old to be an indie game developer? And the answer is still no, and here's why. Unlike most people that watch my videos, I'm pretty f***ing old. I've been a legend since 1971. Well, I've been alive since 1971. But I think I'm well placed to talk about being too old. So let me give you a little background. I don't really remember that much about the 70s, apart from Star Wars and a great goal by Archie Gemmill. It's the 1980s when I become self-aware. And the 1980s was a really mad time to be a kid in the United Kingdom. Her Majesty's forces fought a war in the South Atlantic, whilst Her Majesty's government fought a war against her people at home. The government won, and people are still pissed off about it, as was demonstrated by this old lady during Thatcher's funeral.
Do you think she did any good?
Not a bit of good, not a bit. I'd put a stake through her heart and garlic round her neck to make sure she never come back.
The 80s is when people started informing me that I was too old. First, I was too old to play with my Star Wars toys, and then I became too old to play games on my Commodore 64. The general theme was, it's time to grow up. The 90s were a mad time for me too. I joined the Royal Navy whilst the first Gulf War was raging, and I got kicked out of the Royal Navy via a naval prison during the Bosnian War. I went to college to study graphic design, and then I moved to London where I failed as a graphic designer. By the age of 27, I was renting out a room in Tooting whilst working in a sandwich shop. Apparently, I was on the scrap heap and too old to save. But I ignored the naysayers. And just before the millennium, I went to university, and despite being too old, I completed a degree in computer science. I was the second oldest guy in the class. I was the oldest junior at my first company. I got married in my 30s, which apparently is too old. I became a dad in my 40s, which is apparently too old. I'm a contract software developer at 50, which is apparently too old. And if you ask people now, I'm probably too old to be an indie game developer too. The point here is that people have been telling me that I'm too old since I was a fucking teenager. Think about it. How can you be too old at 30 and middle-aged at 40? It's complete and utter bollocks. If you haven't already figured it out, people are fucking idiots. They walk around like sheep repeating nonsense that clearly doesn't make any sense. Being too old is mostly subjective and is influenced by societal norms and personal beliefs. You should challenge these assumptions and pursue your goals regardless of your age and prove to all the naysayers that age alone is not a limiting factor. Most of the people who watch my videos are between the age of 25 and 44. So you've probably already had a gutful of the "you're too old" bullshit. But clearly, game development is a young male demographic. However, I think that's changing. In the 70s and 80s, creating a game was incredibly difficult. You had limited computing power, rudimentary programming languages, primitive graphics, and limited storage. In the 90s, computing power and graphics improved, but you needed financial power to publish and distribute your games on the high street. During these early years, developers were computer science graduates, and these courses were dominated by 20-something males. In my computer science class, there were no girls, and apart from me and one other guy, all the other students were 20-something males.
Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33, repeating of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, that's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Dragons!
But by the noughties, the internet was here, the software industry was exploding, and Unity, Unreal, and Steam were all released. This convergence of game engines, the internet, and distribution platforms created the perfect recipe for indie game development. And by the teens, indie game development gained pace. And now, a lone developer can create a commercially successful game. Games are no longer the domain of big industry.
God damn it, Leroy.
It's not my fault.
The point here is that the bar for game development is dropping, and when the bar drops, the demographic changes. It's easier to make games, it's easier to distribute games, and thus it is easier for anyone of any age to take a shot at game development. Therefore, whilst 30-something might seem like the wrong demographic today, I'm quite sure we're not going to be saying that 5 or 10 years from now. And I say that without mentioning the big white elephant in the room: artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is here, and it will change everything. ChatGPT and Claude are now essential tools in my development kit. I use them every day, and I don't really see that changing. Recently, Cognition Labs demoed Devin, the first AI software engineer. Whilst Devin is unlikely to replace us developers today, I'm pretty sure it's a window into our future. I taught myself to touch type, and I use Vim. I'm reasonably efficient around an editor, but I will never be able to out-type an AI agent. Never. I definitely see a time when software developers become architects that manage AI agents rather than developers that write code. I also see a future where your favorite IDE prioritizes the AI prompt window rather than the editor window. And I see a future where your favorite game engine operates the same way. I can definitely imagine a future where indie game devs do less coding and more prompting. And surely at that point, developing an indie game becomes even more accessible. But changing demographics and technology aren't the only arguments against the too old bollocks. Creativity and imagination have no age limit. The ability to come up with unique game ideas is not restricted by age. Older game developers can also bring a unique perspective and target underrepresented demographics. As you age, you tend to have a stronger sense of self-confidence and self-assurance, as you've had more time to develop your identity and values. With age often comes increased emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and the ability to better manage your emotions and handle difficult situations. And finally, as you get older, you accumulate a wealth of life experiences and lessons learned which can contribute to greater wisdom, perspective, and decision-making abilities. Of course, it's also entirely possible to be a stupid old I'll end with this. The moment you stop breathing is the moment that you become too old. Before then, everything is fair game.